Awesome. So, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. So this evening is part of Brigstowe's bigger World AIDS Day plans, which have been going on all week. So there's stuff right through until Tuesday. And Alid will talk you through some of those in a moment. But this evening, we thought it was really important to highlight a connection that's already existing in the city anyway, between the Brigstowe project and between OTR Freedom. But we thought it was really important, especially in kind of current circumstances, that we had to think about and reflected on HIV from a kind of multi-generational, intergenerational point of view. So that's the conversation that we're going to have this evening, hopefully. So Alid and myself are joined by 4 panelists. 2 are from Freedom and 2 are volunteers with the Brigstowe project. And we're going to have hopefully some really interesting conversations. We do have a few questions that we're going to make a start with, but as we said before, do feel free to pop some questions in the chat if there's things that you'd like to hear or things that you'd like our panelists to talk about. So firstly, we want to say a really massive thank you to the Care Forum and to the Voice and Influence Partnership, who have supported us this evening by lending us their technology, enabling us to have a webinar this evening. So really great that we've been able to do that. I'm really glad and grateful to be supported in that way. So if people are interested in finding out more about the Voice and Influence Partnership, visit the Care Forum website. You can sign up on there to be a member of the VIP, and the Voice and Influence Partnership is about making sure that individuals and groups in the city have their voices heard in citywide decisions, and it's about reaching out to more marginalised communities. So really great stuff that's happening, really great stuff that's going on. You can sign up to their newsletter. It's super simple to do that on thecareforum.org. Alid, over to you.
Hi everyone, so I'm Alid. I'm the fundraising and communications manager at Brigstowe, and a lot of you probably know me already. I have programmed the World AIDS Day program that we're running this year, and last year as well. This is my second World AIDS Day, but just a brief overview of Brigstowe and who we are. So Brigstowe are a HIV support charity based in Bristol, and we cover the Bristol, South Gloss and North Somerset regions. And we support anybody living with or affected by HIV. And we have been doing so for nearly 24 years. So next year's our 25th. So that's going to be really exciting for us. So we do a lot of work. We have kind of an advice and support service. We've got a migrant and asylum seeker service. Our Positive Voices program, which encompasses our recently diagnosed workshop, our HIV awareness training, and our phenomenal and really, really highly regarded peer mentoring program. Our vision is a world in which people living with HIV live long and healthy lives free from poverty, stigma, prejudice and discrimination. And our mission is to enhance the quality of life for people living with HIV. So yeah, we're really pleased to run this event with OTR Freedom, and they are firm friends of Brigstowe, and we're probably more like family members now than friendships, but yeah, it's really great that everybody is here and joining us for this. Really, it's going to be hopefully quite a rich discussion. So if I pop a thing in the all panelists and attendees, everybody gets to see that, right? Yeah. So I'll add the link to our full World AIDS Day program into the link, so you can all have a look and sign up to more events that we've got going on. So tomorrow is our main celebration, which is usually held in the watershed, but this year it's going to be streamed live from our Facebook page. So join us from 6 o'clock tomorrow evening on our Facebook page, and just search Brigstowe or just tap in at Brigstowe Info, and there we'll have a wonderful evening where we've got an exclusive performance from Sing Out Bristol with their new song that they've done especially for us, which is super cuteness to the max. I've already had a sneaky peek, and we're going to be screening the Cheever film Life Growing Up as well, which if you haven't seen is a powerful 12-minute film highlighting young people's experiences of what it's like growing up, and they were fundamental in all of the design of that film. So it is their voices being told through actors, and it's just incredible. And you'll hear from Natasha again with a Unity hat on and what they've been doing during lockdown, as well as Brigstowe and Fast Track Cities. Sunday is my day off, as I might die, and then Monday we've got in the afternoon we've got a HIV conversation with highlighting the migrant communities of Bristol and the disparities that they have faced during COVID-19. That's between 2 and 3. Again, that's all on Zoom and it's all free, as all of our events are. Monday, there's a Facebook Live with me and Natasha talking about prevention in 2020 and what that looks like. And then Tuesday is the big one. Tuesday is World AIDS Day, and I don't think I've had a busier World AIDS Day in all my life. So if you listen to Sam FM, there'll be some Brigstowe featuring on that. And if you listen to BCFM in the morning, I'm on the breakfast show and talking about our plans. Bristol will be turning red, and you will notice some Bristol buildings being lit up red for World AIDS Day. And then in the evening, in the afternoon, go on to the Bristol Live Facebook page, and there will be a live Q&A streamed from there. And in the evening is our vigil, where we come and we get to have the commemorative side of World AIDS Day, which is always as important. It's amazing how far we've come in HIV and in treatment, and it is great to celebrate that fact and continually celebrate people living with HIV who are thriving now. But we do need to remember those that have lost. So this gives us that space to do that, and that's in the evening between 7 and 8, again on Zoom. And the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence will be joining us to lead in our minute silence and are going to say a few words. So yeah, I hope to see more of you over the next 4 or 5 days, or however long it is. I don't really know what day it is of the week so far, but thank you for joining. And yeah, that's all from me, I think.
Alid, I hope that on Wednesday you will then sleep, because it feels like you might need it.
Yeah, I'm going to sleep a little bit, but I'm going in for a minor op on Thursday, so I'll be put under for a little bit of time, so I'll be sleeping then.
Sure. Amazing. So hello everyone, my name is Natasha. I use she and her pronouns. I'm here as part of Freedom Youth. So Freedom Youth is a gender and sexuality project, works with LGBTQ+ young people in Bristol and South Gloss, not North Somerset. I did these slides, I should know that. We are part of OTR Bristol. OTR is a young person's mental health social movement. Hopefully you've heard of us before, but if not, visit our website, which is otrbristol.org.uk. So Freedom have been around since 1995. So we're just a tiny bit older than Brigstowe. We celebrated our 25th birthday this year, which we're very excited about. And we offer group social spaces for young people, one-to-one therapies. We're involved in social action in the city and deliver training and consultancy. So all sorts of different things going on. We'd always love to hear from you. So do get in touch, lgbtq@otrbristol.org.uk. And yeah, we would love to hear more from you all. I'm going to hand over to our panelists, and hopefully you'll be hearing far less from Alid and I this evening and far more from our panelists. So if I hand over to Loie. Loie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Loie, they, them pronouns. I'm part of Freedom, but also you might have heard my name because I work for Bristol 24/7 as well, but I'm here predominantly with my Freedom hat on tonight.
And then Molly, can we go to you?
Hi, I'm Molly. I use she and they. I'm also part of Freedom. And yeah, I'm just sort of here to talk about this topic, and sort of needs to be spoken about, really. Needs to be more about it. So yeah, that's why I'm
Amazing.
here.
Thank you. And then Andy, can we come to you?
Hi, yeah, my name is Andrew. I've been part of Brigstowe project for the last 12 years. For the last 6 of those, I've been a peer mentor, helping people who've been newly or very recently diagnosed with HIV. 4 of those last years, I've been a senior peer mentor. I've directly been involved with HIV for the last nearly 32 years. I was diagnosed in March of 1989. So I'm a little bit of an old hand when it comes to HIV. Back then, organizations like this didn't exist. There was no medication. And it was literally go it alone. Get on with it and keep going, or you don't, and it was bye-bye. So any questions about the old days, ask away.
And I think that's exactly the conversation that we want to have, Andrew, is just reflecting on that experience and the experiences that, you know, you've shared there, and how different things are. I think that's really important. And I think it's really important that we recognise that on World AIDS Day and all year round, but particularly on World AIDS Day. And then Ash, can we come over to you?
Yeah, I'm Ashley. I use they, them, she occasionally. I've been HIV positive for 10 years. I was diagnosed 5 years ago, so I'm a late diagnosis. I've been involved with Brigstowe for around 3.5 years, I think. I'm a peer mentor, a senior mentor, and heavily involved with campaigns. And really, I just shout and bawl about HIV. That's what I do, and I let everybody know. You know.
You do, and keep an eye out this weekend on the Bristol Live. Ashley will have their article published this weekend. So the Bristol Live have run a series of stories of people living with HIV in the lead up to World AIDS Day, highlighting some really amazing Bristol folks that we have in this city. And it's Ashley's turn. So it's always great to give Ashley the spotlight because they shine all the time.
Loves it.
I will reiterate that, definitely.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that that despite being HIV positive, this sort of made me the person I am now, and I can be confident to be the person I am, because I wouldn't have done it before. But that is the only good thing I think about HIV at the moment. But anyway, that's me.
Thanks, Ash.
Okay.
Thank you all. I'm so excited.
Yeah, certainly. Amazing. So I feel like this might be a good one for you to start with, Andrew. So next year, so 2021, will be 40 years since the New York Times article was published, which spoke of a rare cancer that had been seen in 41 homosexuals, was the headline. So what do you think has changed in that time about HIV knowledge and awareness?
It's just unrecognizably, even when I was diagnosed. So many people out there. I went to so many funerals. I stopped going when it got to 50. I just couldn't take any more. And I did something very similar to what I do now. I was part of a group over in Cardiff that sort of started up a group of similar sort of support group, because there was nothing called Cardiff Body Positive. Basically, we couldn't sort of offer any medical help or anything else like that. But it was just a case of all of us people who were positive being in a majority as opposed to a minority for once. And way back then, never in a million years did I ever think that we would be in this incredible position that we are today with U equals U. Whereas we cannot pass it on, and it's such an important message to pass on, that we're actually safe to go with. We're not a leper anymore. And I can remember, even to this day, I'm literally haunted by the AIDS face. And I always had, I think with me it was mind over matter. I always said that I got this little tiny virus inside of me and it's never ever going to get the better of me. But I had PCP twice, pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, which was pretty horrific. It's a really horrible thing. But my biggest fear was that terrible cancer, Kaposi sarcoma. And I can just remember seeing such incredibly handsome people that they were just decimated by it. And I know somebody very well who had it several years ago, and seeing him now, and I didn't know him back then, but seeing him now, you would never ever know. But it was the most horrific, most horrendous cancer. Part of the work that I did with Cardiff Body Positive at the time, we had a member who was from Manchester originally, and he was living down here, and he had serious KS, and it was literally on the outside, on the inside. And his dying wish was to go back home. So we took him back home, and he insisted on driving. He was incredibly independent. And he drove a Mercedes, and he also had incredibly bad water retention because of the KS. And the seats in his car were very sort of hard, really. And we stopped off at a service station where he'd been sitting in this car. He jumped out, and his bum was literally square shaped because of this KS. And thankfully, we all got on well enough that we all had a damn good laugh about it at the time. But it was, that cancer was absolutely horrendous. It really, really was. And the majority of people who had KS, they literally sort of went home and hardly went out again. So for me, 32 years later, to be where things are now, where it's almost life as normal. I was 15 years without medication because I was terrified of the meds, because I saw firsthand of what AZT did to people. We used to say at the time, if you don't die of AIDS, die of AZT poisoning, because the doses were just so high. And I genuinely believe that I am here today because I wasn't on AZT. But to be in this position now, just sitting here talking to all of you, who would have thought that I can't pass it on, I'm healthy, and what the hell's going to happen in the next 30, 40 years?
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Yeah, I think really pertinent point there, Andy. And I think that, that image that you've mentioned there of Kaposi's sarcoma is still so pertinent, isn't it? And it's something that still comes to mind for lots of people, I think. And I wonder, Molly and Loie, how does hearing Andrew's story contrast maybe to your own understanding or knowledge around HIV and the ways in which you became aware of the virus? I which was unhelpful, sorry.
No, I think for me, education around HIV was very limited, but what I have learned has been predominantly through charities like Clifton, and to be able to access that information widely and it not coming necessarily from biased media outlets, and being able to get reliable information is, well, one of the first things I knew about it was that U equals U, and to think that could be so different, like it's something I knew about, but then to hear it firsthand is like incredibly difficult to hear.
Yeah, I think sort of with my education behind it, I mean, I think HIV is something I learned about in school, but you don't learn much about it. You just, all they tell you is that it was this deadly thing that happened, and they don't really go into about it. I think where I started to get a proper education about it was after I joined Freedom, and Alid came along and just sort of spoke to us all about it, really. And that's where I actually started to understand what it actually is, and U equals U, and it's the preventatives that exist and all that sort of stuff. Now I would never have known that if it wasn't for Freedom and sort of that sort of Brigstowe coming in and actually explaining it.
Oh.
Good old Alid.
Well done, Alid.
I think that reflection's really important, and exactly why Alid and I chose to set up this conversation, I think, because I think that's a long-standing relationship between Brigstowe and Freedom. What about yourself, Ash? How does this, what is your thoughts around this?
Well, mine goes back to when Andrew, I suppose, was diagnosed HIV positive, was the horror stories of Freddie Mercury, the last picture of Freddie Mercury. If the youngsters want to look at it, and Kenny Everett, he's and rock Hudson, they're like walking skeletons. Really, Freddie Mercury from a big man or a big pop star or rock star to how he died. And then I thought at that time, I'll never get that. And then the tombstone adverts come through the letterbox, and I remember picking it up, and my mum discreetly put it away because she thought, and she still does, not talk about my status. It's a very old-fashioned. It's still very old-fashioned to talk about it, and it still is, unfortunately, and that's what I think the biggest problem is now, that it's the older generation maybe or are prepared to talk about it. So back to, I didn't think I was going to get it, and go to 2010, and suddenly I got seriously ill. I mean, literally 2.5 months of flu on steroids I had, and then 5 years of decreasing health to the point of virtually AIDS, I suppose, when my appendix gave up. So it has changed, but I don't think the information is still out there enough. It's still a taboo subject. We won't talk about that, like the girls have said, or the youngsters have said. The schools don't teach it, and they should teach it, and how it transmits. And maybe the world's too prude. I think it's a prude world that unless you talk about sex and the transmission of diseases, I don't think we're ever going to change it. It's obviously better, but when I was diagnosed, I had to go and find out myself. I had to go and find information about it. It wouldn't. I mean, the clinic gave me a little Brigstowe thing to go to, but I wasn't ready for that, and it took me 18 months to go and find out. So I think if the information was on billboards or on television again, or just not the tombstone adverts, but like Brigstowe, we do a 10-fact thing at Brigstowe, and things like that. Just make the information more accessible to everybody, and then drag it out of the closet. I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's in the closet, Like
drag it out, kicking and screaming.
Yes, that's right. Nobody wants to talk about it, do they?
Well, that leads on quite nicely to our next question, which is, why do you think it is important that we keep talking about HIV, and whose responsibility is it to talk about? Let's go with Loie first.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, so why is it important that we keep talking about HIV, and in your opinion, whose responsibility is it to talk about?
Cool. I think in the same way that any topic that's been stereotyped and discriminated against in the past is important to keep talking about, because otherwise it's so easy for those deep set ideas to come creeping back in, and I think conversation is the first way to stop that. And I don't know who. I think it's really hard to think about whose responsibility it is, because I had very little education about it in school, and arguably that would have been a great place to have learned some more. And predominantly I've learned most of it through either Freedom or through actually in my job when I've spoken to you, Alan, for work I've done for Bristol 24/7. So it feels like it probably, I don't know who should be the one who teaches about it, but I think it should be more widely spread than it is, and it shouldn't have to necessarily be, I learned about this because I'm already in these queer communities, and that's why I found out more about this disease. So yeah, I don't know, that's not a clear-cut answer. There's so many different ways you could answer that question.
Yeah. Andy, did you want to come in and say, like, why do you think it's important we keep talking about it?
Because it's still there. Unfortunately, it's an issue that's been swept under the carpet. We had those horrendous adverts in the 80s, those tombstone ones that put the absolute fear of death into me. And not in a million years did I ever think I would get the damn thing, but hey ho, you never ever know what's around the corner. Unfortunately, there's no education. It's not discussed, it's not talked about. It doesn't need an advertising campaign, but it needs red ribbon somewhere. It needs to be it needs to be made a subject that people can discuss, talk, not go into depth, not know the ins and outs of it all or anything else, but just have it there, in the background. Talk about it like we talk about the weather, just make it an everyday conversation, just so that people of all ages, whether it be kids of 9 or 10, or even pensioners in their 80s and 90s, so they know what it is, they know what the situation is with it today, that it isn't this horrendous killer disease. It's now a very livable condition. And we need to make it more out there. Hopefully through Alice's work, lighting up Bristol Bright Red, that may spark some conversation. But that's all we need. We need things to happen to start a conversation, to spark a conversation. And unfortunately, it's just been swept under the carpet. And we need to bring it out. We need to bring it back into the public arena.
Molly,
for the sake of people's lives.
Yeah, definitely agreed. Yeah, and Molly, what do you think with that question?
I always think it's important to, what I find myself doing is whenever it comes up in conversation, or if somehow it comes up, like when I was in uni, the conversation came up about it, and I was actively using the information that I've gotten to correct people and explain about U equals U, and just correct some of the misinformation that people have about it. So I still think that outside of the LGBT community, it isn't really talked about much, if at all, and they still have the misconceptions of back when it was like in the 80s. They still think about the tombstone adverts, like you were saying, and they don't have this new information. So I think it's important that for all of us that we know about this, we just, if it comes up, we correct people and then encourage them to correct others, and hopefully that will spread the information out.
Yeah, definitely. I always seem to think that it's a bit like a quote by Mother Teresa is, "I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone among the water to create many ripples." And you know, that fits in exactly right. Like, you do not know the impact of having one conversation could have. And it's that one conversation and the person listening to that having another conversation and that person having another conversation, and so on, that you fundamentally, the further those ripples go out into the water, the bigger they become. And the more ripples that happen, hopefully the tide will change and people will eventually talk about it, and it will be a well-known, normal conversation to have. Ashley, just come to you to round kind of like this section up. Why do you think it's important we keep talking about it?
Because it affects people's lives, and I heard today, I think it's from you, 1 million people died from HIV and AIDS last year. So it's still very much with us, and I would have thought that whenever the poppy appeals on, people will walk about with poppies on. But we're on World AIDS Day week now. We're heading for it. We're halfway through it, and there's 3 people on here wearing a red ribbon. Where are they on the television? Why aren't they wearing red ribbons there? Why don't, when I go for a walk, why don't I see people wearing red ribbons? Is it? I think it's got to be made more important that it's still here, and it's still killed more people than COVID will ever do, because COVID they're on the way to it. But I think HIV, that it's back to this It's prudishness that we won't talk about that. And even the television won't talk about it. And the government won't talk about it. It's, maybe I'm going off course a bit, but I think we've still got to talk about it because it affects everybody. It affects the people that got it, it affects the families, it affects children. So it's a worldwide problem, really a worldwide problem. Even though we can live well, I'm sure people who've got it would rather live without it and not be judged for having it.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about pandemics, and we're talking about, you know, the HIV and AIDS pandemic in contrast to COVID, you know, the first case of AIDS was in San Francisco back in 1984, and since then 35 million people have lost their lives to HIV or an AIDS related illness, which has made it one of the most destructive pandemics the world has seen in that short space of time. And we're still not at a curable level. You know, every year we're looking at around nearly 4,500 new diagnoses of HIV in the UK. So it isn't going away anytime soon. We hope it will. You know, we are dedicated and hopefully signing up to ending new transmissions by 2030, but that takes a lot of work. And when we're talking about the responsibility, I think it's everybody's responsibility. The first letter of HIV is human. So as long as you're a human, it's going to affect you. And if you are a human, it's your responsibility. Anybody who knows to talk, like Molly said, you know, challenge those behaviors, correct those facts, myth bust, wear a ribbon to start that conversation. I said earlier in a different call, you know, you will never know the impact you have if you're walking down the street with a red ribbon on and you walk past someone who is HIV positive. They will be the first person to clock it, just as much as I'm one of the first people to clock a rainbow somewhere. It's the same with HIV, and they will go home knowing and remembering that they saw that person wearing a red ribbon, that they have no idea who they are, but they will feel a hell of a lot better if you are wearing one and if you're not.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Alan. And I think with that statistic, isn't there, that says that 1 in 5 people don't feel comfortable wearing a red ribbon. And if we think about that and we think about what that says in terms of stigma, and the number of people that wear visible symbols for other illnesses, I think that feels like something that we really need to shift that narrative. And, you know, conversations like this are exactly how that happens. And I think in terms of responsibility, yeah, I agree with you, Alid. I think it's everyone's responsibility. And I think that it's, we can often leave it to be the emotional labour for people who are living with HIV or people who are working within services or whatever that might be. And, you know, Alid and I are in a different position here in that we are both employed in HIV services, and it is literally our job to talk about HIV. But I think what's really kind of lovely and wonderful, and this is something that we really encourage at Freedom, is having those conversations, breaking down that stigma, being able to challenge some of that misinformation. And I think it's really valid and important that we recognise that actually that tombstone ad is still most people's first thought when they think of HIV. And we've had a comment come in about how, you know, a lot of people still, and this is something that I'm sure we can all understand and agree with, a lot of people still talking about AIDS rather than talking about HIV. And sometimes it's just that gentle challenge around why we might talk about HIV rather than talk about AIDS, for example, that can make a real difference to people, because I think people's ideas are often, you know, just dated now. But if they haven't been given that information, or if that information doesn't feel accessible to them, I think it is often written off as a LGBTQ plus thing rather than just a human thing. And that's really important.
Yeah, and it's with regards to that tombstone ad, you know, that's probably one of the most effective marketing campaigns this country has ever seen. You know, those billboards were everywhere, and every household got a leaflet posted through their door, explaining them telling them about AIDS, don't die of ignorance, and how this new deadly thing is sweeping the country. And they're quite harrowing, and like 30 plus years on, and people are still having those images, and people still relate. And I know when I got diagnosed, that was one of the first images that came to my mind. And then when we're talking about wearing ribbons, let's say, and how other people or the general society wear other medical awareness ribbons, considering the HIV red ribbon was the first one to have been designed and to have been invented. Let's say it's the very first medical ribbon that ever was the red ribbon HIV. Yeah, the other ribbons are taking over, but hopefully they won't get buildings lit up in those colours. So yeah, maybe we can say at certain points we are winning.
Also, as well, I find, well, through some of my bad experiences with the doctors when I was getting sick, there's nothing in doctors' surgeries about HIV at all. There is, and when I asked them about it, because they had chlamydia tests in the clinic, and I said, "What about HIV tests?" "Oh, we don't deal with that." So even I don't even think the doctors, like the GPs, are taking responsibility. I know we're all responsible for our own actions, and you know, but human beings are human beings, and we do what we do, and we can't help what we do. But I still think that the doctors and maybe the government, because look at the job we had to get PrEP. You know, that was a real uphill. Like Alex said earlier, it was a life. They see it as a life choice. Well, women get the pill to stop pregnancy. You know, it's the same. It's the same thing, isn't it? You know, it is a life choice. But if you can stop people dying, then the government or the doctors have got to take responsibility as well as the rest of the population, and it's got to be advertised. It's got to be spread that HIV is still with us and still killing people.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Ash, around just information and about people recognizing and kind of taking responsibility for testing, for prevention, for all of those things, not to assign any kind of shame around those ideas, but just to say, like, actually, if you need to access HIV test, this is where you get a HIV test. This is how you access PrEP. This is how, you know, these are the ways in which you can look after your health. Feels really important, I think.
Yeah, I think when it comes to HIV, talking about it, whether it's from a professional point of view, whether you're a clinician or a prevention worker or a GP or a medic or a teacher, there seems to be a lot of morality involved in informing people of the facts and informing people of where to go and how to prevent and how to look after yourself. There seems to be this heavy, like, moral judgment based on an individual's practices, rather than giving people all of the facts so they can go away and make an informed choice themselves. And that comes into play as well when we talk about U equals U, and when we do surveys with people living with HIV, and we ask them, where did you find, who told you about U equals U as a HIV positive person? And we're still getting responses back from people saying that it was from a friend or from the third sector. And we're still having people say that their clinicians didn't tell them and have never told them. And they're the HIV specialist clinicians. And when you then dig into that question and you ask them why they're not telling their patients about this groundbreaking thing, it comes down to the fact that if they talk about U equals U, they feel like they're promoting bareback sex or condomless sex. And should they be doing that as a health promotion or as somebody in public health? And it's a case of, it's not your job to promote or not promote. It's not your job to moralize anybody's behaviors, but it's your job to inform them so they can go away and make an informed choice. Would you tell someone who's coming off the pill that you're not going to advise them to come off the pill because you're going to get pregnant? Like, you would still tell them all of the facts. So why, when it comes to HIV, is the way we frame those conversations and questions different to other health conditions?
Yeah, certainly. I think we've already started kind of leaning in a little bit to conversations around the current circumstance and the kind of COVID-19 pandemic. And I wonder what people's thoughts are. Probably coming to Molly first around your experiences of the current pandemic. And whilst I recognise that you wouldn't have been alive in the 80s and 90s when the when the HIV epidemic was much kind of more visible, if you like. What are your thoughts around kind of comparing those two time periods, or your experiences of being LGBTQ during a pandemic?
It's just especially with today's pandemic, it's very isolating. I think everyone feels that. Everything being over Zoom calls, like, I think this would be much better if we were in a big conference hall right now with having an audience in front of us. Instead, we got our hidden audience that we can't see, but they're still there. Yeah, I'm not really sure what to say about the subject, really. Yeah, I don't really know. I might have to pass this one on.
No, of course. I mean, it feels like that word isolation might be really key. But perhaps if we go over to Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Oh, it's driven me absolutely up the wall. Absolutely mental. I'm lucky in the fact that I'm one of these people that actually enjoy my own company, and I'm not sort of out on the lash every sort of weekend or anything else like that. And I'm not one to go particularly far anyway. But with what's happened now, it's the case of that option's been taken away from me. I've got a little dog that I take it every day, and that's sort of an hour or so sort of walk, but it's not the same. And constantly having to sort of be aware, not only for my own safety, but those around me as well. There's a little shop sort of just around the corner from where I live, and I've sort of got there several times recently and not had a mask. It's like, oh, damn. So I had to turn all the way back and get a mask, not necessarily for my safety, but for others. And I suppose in a way, it can be related to HIV and AIDS. It's looking out for my safety now, the same as it was looking out for my safety back then. I'm not going to go into the reasons as to how and why I sort of contracted HIV. That's a completely different story, and we'd be here until midnight, but there we go. But it's a similar sort of thing, and I do wonder how the various governments around the world back in the 80s would have handled the AIDS epidemic had it been now.
Yeah, certainly. It feels like there are definite parallels. And I think what felt really kind of interesting to consider is the idea of, who are we relying on for information, recognizing that there are people who have lived through a pandemic, and there were a lot of conversation around how this is, the first pandemic of its kind, and then a lot of people being like, well, actually, there have been other pandemics during living memory. I mean, Loie, what about yourself? Have you got any kind of thoughts or reflections around this?
I think it's interesting potentially how the focus has been, I want to make sure I phrase this correctly, but like on minority groups, and potentially almost like putting blame on those groups, when actually it can be looked at as a massive societal thing that's going on. So I think that's super interesting. But yeah, I don't have any more like deep thoughts on that, but other than, I just think it's an interesting thing to think about, and always putting those blame on minority groups, even if it changes, depending on the situation and who's the better scapegoat. But that's something that seems to be quite prominent in these
systems. And I think I'd echo that, Loie, in the case of like there is this kind of this level of blame and this blaming culture where when someone has contracted COVID, it must have been because they did something wrong. They weren't following the rules. They broke them. It's their fault. They know that this risk is happening. Why are they allowing risky behaviors to take place? And you can mirror that with the tone of the language that was happening back in the 80s and 90s, especially when we're talking about the gay community, where this virus was being described and narrated as a gay cancer, a gay plague. And why is this community who know that this thing is happening is still are still allowing themselves to become a victim of or to contract, knowing that the risks are high and that this thing is happening? Why, and it's that level of blame onto the person rather than to the situations or the institutions that should be informing us and helping to protect us. The blame isn't on them, it's all on the individual. And it's all on us to take that on and to take that burden on, I think.
Yeah, I think really important point, Aled. I mean, Ash, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think I feel the same as Molly and Loie. Really, it's like and Andrew, it's the isolation. I'm used to it on this second lockdown, but the first one I did isolate for 2 or 3 weeks at the danger time. But it is isolation, especially as a single gay person or whatever I am now. But
you're just you, and you always will be, and that's why we love you.
Well, me, yeah. So me as a person, it was the isolation and not being able to meet as well. We had a campaigns meeting with Aled, and we actually met down at Easton, and we all thoroughly enjoyed it because we actually seen each other. But it's hard. And this Zoom thing, it doesn't. I know I'm getting used to it, but I don't know about anybody else here. But I don't really like it. There is a phrase that me and Aled use is zoomed out now, and I expect by next Tuesday we will be zoomed out. But like I say, it's isolation and even my neighbours. They're walking past and we're sort of 6 feet away and we're good friends. So and that's the hard bit. That is the hard bit. Really.
Yeah, I also think when we're looking at the two pandemics, it's this narrative of like putting people in an other box. It's them and us, which I think was also very kind of quite prominent back in the 90s, of them and us, rather than it being a collective approach and a collective just humanity approach and reaction and stuff. And yeah, I think when we're looking at how do we handle the COVID pandemic, whether that's in relation to test and trace or whether that's from a community response level, you have a massive community that have already lived through one, a just massively destructive one, and you already have a group of experts who do test and trace every day when it comes to contact tracing with terms of sexual health. Why are we not tapping in to that knowledge, those experiences, to be able to inform us on how to move forward and how to become stronger? And I think as LGBTQ plus people, we'll come out of this second one even stronger than we did the first. We're already the experts. We're already like fully armored, to be fair, to deal with some sort of a pandemic. Yes, the rules are slightly different, like we're a bit more locked in or a bit more isolated, but that sense of community within our community, of whether that's drag shows still being delivered online, whether that's support groups still meeting up, whether that's anything that's happening, we know how to pick each other up, and we're very good at that, and we look after each other because no one else does seem to look after us at times. So yeah, I think we'll come out of this one a stronger sense of togetherness, even though there are some difficult conversations happening right now in terms of the T of the LGBT community. But I think, yeah, 2021, I think everybody was looking forward to 2020, but 2021 is going to be the year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like a very nice kind of point to start wrapping up on, Alid. We've got about 5 minutes or so left, so if anybody does have audience questions, there is a quick chance to get them in. We'd love to hear from you. But just as a final thought, has anybody got like, what is one thing that they'd like people to take away from this evening and from this kind of week of World AIDS Day events more broadly? If we start with you, Andrew, what's your kind of one tip that you'd like people to take away? One thing.
World AIDS Day means an awful lot to me. A lot of people, a lot of friends, very, very close friends died, and I was actually there when a lot of them died. A lot of people not only died of AIDS, they also committed suicide. And I can remember their faces. And to me, it's very important to remember then, as well as now. And even if somebody doesn't know somebody who's died of AIDS, just sort of think about those tombstone adverts, the horror that was sort of around back then, and the fear, and nobody can understand how that was. And World AIDS Day for me is a time to remember, and it's also a time to celebrate. It's a time to celebrate now the incredible advances in medication, U equals U. So for me, it's sort of like a past, it's a present, but more importantly, it's the future and what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. They may get a cure, I don't know. If they do, would I take it? I don't know. I've got a pretty good life, really. I haven't done too badly over the last 30 years. I'm probably rabbiting far too much, so I will shut up. And if anybody wants to ask a question, carry on.
I think we should remember the people that have died, the people that died of AZT, and not necessarily the HIV and the AIDS. But I think it's like Andrew. I think it's a celebration of where we've got to, and the camaraderie of the people with HIV, all the people I know in Brigstowe, and all the people I know with HIV, and the LGBTQ groups, trans CAF included. And I think it is a celebration as well that we've come this far. Maybe it is a time that we can really get the U equals U message out there. I mean, maybe we can push forward and get a little bit more publicity out of it, hopefully.
We have had a question come through, which has said that that final point that Alid made of we look after each other because nobody else does feels really apt. And in what ways as a city can we look after each other more? What ways as a community of LGBTQ plus people can we look after each other more? And how can we kind of spread this message of awareness and of U equals U and of PrEP and of all the other things that we talk about and know about? How can we spread that message more across the city? So if I come to Loie for that one first. Sorry, Loie, you looked a bit terrified then, and I did it anyway. I'm sorry.
That's a big question. I think partly it's so I feel like in quite a privileged position that I am a sort of, in a way, a loudspeaker. I have a platform that I'm the city's only LGBTQ+ editor. So I kind of have this place where in my work, with my work hat on, I can spread this message.
And you do it very well, I may add. Thank you, Louise. You are and I've always said, you know, it's a platform to put other queer people up there. It's not just for me. Like my skills is in writing words, and I'll put people's words out there. But I wish other, not only in Bristol but the wider media also did spread that message of awareness and just talking more. I think it's no good if one small media outlet in the city is doing that. It needs to be a city-wide effort and a UK-wide effort to do that. I hope that makes some sort of sense. But yeah, I think it can't just be one person trying to help and platform all these queer voices. It needs to be city-wide, everyone to uplift all these queer voices. Yeah, definitely. I think I would agree.
Yeah, certainly. And that feels like a nice kind of thing to take forward for us all to have a think about. What about yourself, Molly? Anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think we've covered quite a lot. I think an important thing for us all to take away is just, if we learn anything new during this week of World AIDS Week, I'm gonna say, and with Brigstowe, just share it with someone the next time in conversation. Just one bit of information can then get that person to then share it with someone else, and it can spread, and hopefully we can get some more people informed with the correct information and make the subject less taboo amongst
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think trying to answer kind of Henry's question, I think it would be in like, what can we do citywide to either look after each other more or speak out about U equals U or HIV education, is talk. Don't be afraid to talk to each other. Like even if we're talking about sex, it's very un-British to talk about sex. It doesn't happen a lot unless it's embarrassing or unless we're talking about starting a family. But through that conversation with your friend about something that happened during a sexual act, or what happened maybe before or after, you may then realize that your friend has probably gone through it as well, or something very, very similar. So you don't actually then feel weird. You don't feel like you're the only one. And you realize that probably what you've gone through, like a lot of us have as well at some point. So don't be afraid to talk to each other. Don't be afraid to talk about it. And when we're saying how can we look after each other more, it is talking. Drop that friend a message that you haven't heard from in a while. You know, I'm gonna kind of reflect here. You know, we this week have lost a really prominent LGBT individual in Bristol, suddenly, really suddenly, and I only read the news today, and it's sad. It's really sad. And I think, you know, when you look, you know, I definitely potentially could have reached out to that person more. I could have dropped them a message because I hadn't seen them post in a couple of days, or I saw an off Facebook status, or I saw something. So I think it's talking to each other, picking up the phone, dropping them a message, even if it's reacting to a status. So you're like subconsciously or passively aggressively getting in touch. If they've posted something, like it, react to it, drop them a message afterwards. And I think so talk to each other in all manner of aspects. I think that is how we can combat both of those things.
Yeah, I agree. I think conversation is really key, and especially right now at a time where we all probably feel a little bit isolated, a little bit separate, a little bit, you know, divided in lots of ways. The ways in which we can come together and the ways in which we can reach out to each other and take care of each other feel even more important. I think also, just to start wrapping up, I think just to reference that you know, Brigstowe exists in Bristol. We're very lucky to have Brigstowe in Bristol. We've got THT, we've got Chiva, we've got all sorts of organisations that are doing work in these fields. We've got lots of information and resources that are available to you. Do have a look online, do come along to events like this evening. Obviously, those of you that are here, you're already here, that's great. But there's, you know, a whole other series of stuff that happens. And do look, like I was looking on the Brigstowe website earlier on, and there's some really interesting information on there. There's been some really cool webinars and stuff happening all throughout this period. So, you know, equip yourselves with knowledge, and then you can equip other people with knowledge too. And that feels really like, yeah, vitally important, because as everyone has said really eloquently, those conversations, you don't know how far those ripples will spread, and sometimes it's just that one little challenge or that one person seeing your red ribbon or whatever it might be, which starts a conversation which then changes the direction of a person's thoughts, and that feels really important.
Yeah,
and it can save their life.
yes,
yeah, very true.
Yeah,
Very true.
fundamentally, yeah, I think that's the best way we could probably end on.
Yeah.
Andy,
Amazing.
that is the statement. But,
can I say after this year, hopefully next year, with we can catch up with all the nice Pride events, and we can all catch up with each other, and we can have a wonderful time.
Certainly.
There'll be a double
Just
Pride
think
next year to
how
make up for this
exciting
year.
it'll be.
Pardon, Natasha?
Just think how exciting it'll be next year when we are all, together at Pride or Trans Pride or World AIDS Day or whatever it might be. It'll just be that extra special.
I really miss standing behind that Brigstowe stall at all events, you know, in all weathers. I don't really care. Even if the first one's pouring with rain, I don't really care. Don't say
that in front of Alidash, because he'll have you signed up for everything next year.
Let's just get back together.
You won't get me out in the rain, that's for sure.
But yeah, no, I think that's the lovely part to end. I've already realised that we've gone 6 minutes over, but I think the conversation was too rich to cut it short. But I just want to say thank you everybody for coming today. Thank you to Natasha, thank you to Ash, Molly, Loie, Andy, and thank you to Pete and the Care Forum for allowing us to use their platform. It's been a great conversation, and I think we could have had another hour of chat, but at least definitely. But it's a Friday night, we all deserve a glass of wine or a cup of tea, and something to eat. But yeah, please do join us for the rest of the week. I posted in the chat our full World AIDS Day programme, but if you want to hear more about experiences of living with HIV, tomorrow at our World AIDS Day event, streamed live on our Facebook page, we've got 2 women living with HIV sharing their experience, and one trans person, one trans man, sharing their words as well of what it has been like living with HIV, as well as Chiva and Unity and THT and everything, and Brigstowe and everything else happening tomorrow. So tomorrow night's going to be really good. I'm super excited. I'm super pumped. But yeah, join us then, and just have it on in the background, or do a viewing party on Facebook, plug it in, switch it on the TV, get it widescreen. It's going to be a great night. But from all of us, I think, thank you so much. I can't say thank you enough. You've all been incredible.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. We really appreciate it, and we will speak to you all really soon.
Yeah, thank you for giving us your time.
Thanks for listening.
Say bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.